Okay, and we are live. My name is Andrea Thompson. I'm the founder and director of the Film Girl Film Festival, and I am privileged to be chatting here with many of the directors from our Drama Shorts 4 block. So, ladies, thank you all for joining me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I'm going to do what I generally do first is that ask each of you to go around and introduce yourselves and give a brief synopsis of what your short film is about. So Melanie, why don't we start with you?
Sure. So my name is Melanie. I directed the short Princesa. It's about a Mexican immigrant father who throws his daughter's quinceañera in their living room and struggles with the pressures of watching her grow up and financially supporting her.
Jessica?
I'm Jessica, and my film is The Paint Wizard, and it is about a transgendered house painter in Austin.
And Lucia?
Hi, my name is Lucia, and my film is Orchestra from the Land of Silence. It's about all-women orchestra in Afghanistan that we followed on their way to Europe.
And yes, one thing that strikes me about all your short films is that each, in a way, are about women, and also in a few instances, male characters struggling with their place in the world. So I'd like to ask each of you why you decided to tell this particular story. So Melanie, I'm curious, why did you decide to tell this father-daughter story for your short?
Well, previously beforehand, I tended to make films that had a character centered around women who shared similar experiences to me. So I wanted to challenge myself to make a film whose main character I don't directly relate to, a middle-aged Hispanic man, but it is personal to me because it is my dad, my uncles, my grandfather. So I made the film because I wanted to show the relationship of being an immigrant in the United States, of what that means to a culture, specifically being a Mexican immigrant. And I wanted to not tell that through the 15-year-old girl, who I could have done very easily, but I wanted to express it through my main character, because I think I wanted to take on a little bit more of what it also means to like what masculinity means in a Hispanic household, what like machismo means in a Hispanic household. So I wanted to challenge myself and do it that way.
Yeah, I thought that was quite fascinating, because you kind of really get a sense of them both and you do justice to both, because yeah, he is kind of very patriarchal in a way, but he's also very kind and respectful of his daughter, and he's really struggling trying to see her as an adult.
Yes.
So Jessica, how did you meet her? What made you decide to focus on her story and tell this story?
Sure. So my co-director, Jesse Orrit, and I met Millie, our subject, last year. We were introduced by someone whose house she was painting. And really, in talking to her, really thought her story was quite fascinating, and then also very universal. You know, she was struggling, kind of figuring out her own personal identity, and had a lot of issues and insecurities about who she was. And when she decided to transition and to become Millie, she's in her early 60s, and to think about having to go through your whole life kind of knowing that you were different, but not really understanding how to formalize that and how to talk about that, really moved us. And we thought that was a really interesting, that we wanted to learn more about, because although I am a cis woman, I really identify with that idea of, you know, sometimes not feeling comfortable in your own skin. And yeah, and so getting to know Millie and hearing her story and really allowing her to tell her story, and getting to see that was really, it was, you know, a remarkable thing for us.
Yeah, and that definitely comes off in the film. So definitely. And Lucia, how'd you run into this story?
Well, I'm making these films with this festival in Slovakia. Is the biggest festival, music festival, and they invited this orchestra from Afghanistan. And as they were organizing like all the issues and visas, they learned like how important this orchestra is and what are they actually doing. And this idea of like fighting for freedom with music was so fantastic that we decided to skip this year like festival film, and we traveled to Afghanistan to make a film about these young brave girls. And as we traveled with them to Slovakia, 4 of the girls ran away. So we did not expect that, but in my film we try to talk about the reasons for girls to stay and to fight Taliban and like all the terrible conditions women are in Afghanistan. But we as well understand like why the girls want to just leave and live their life freely in Europe.
That's actually a good segue into my next question, because what another thing that really strikes me as unique about your stories is they're being told in a way, not only are they being told in a way we're not used to seeing, but pretty much all of your characters in the mainstream media are traditionally associated with violence. Violence is generally very much a part of their stories, and there seemed like to be a conscious decision to not focus on that, to not make that either a part of the story or a huge part. So Lucy, I wanted to kind of start with you this time and say, was that really a conscious decision to not include violence so much, even though clearly it was a part of the story?
Well, yeah, it's like at the back of the story, because everybody knows what's happening in Afghanistan and like what the country been through. But these young brave girls, they fight for a different Afghanistan, for a like different phase of the country. And yeah, we decided to tell the story like how to kill the beast with the power of music, as the as the director of the orchestra says.
And Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of violence against the transgendered community, and I know that Millie feels vulnerable in those situations. But she is also pretty tough and can hold her own, and and has never come across an incident where she felt threatened or uncomfortable. Probably because she presents herself in a way that you kind of don't want to mess with her.
Yeah, I really got that sense. She was very like, this is who I am, and don't question it, basically.
Exactly.
Talk, but don't question. Right? And yeah, Melanie, this was especially a concern of mine, and why I was so glad to have your film on board, because I have a few other films by that focus on the Latinx experience, and specifically the Mexican American or Mexican experience. But yeah, Sin Cielo, that did involve kind of violence being inflicted on girls down there. So I was very glad to have your short Princesa that didn't have that element, but was still very much within that culture. So can you tell me why you took that approach? Because yeah, it shouldn't be unusual to include a story about these kind of characters that doesn't have violence in it, but sadly it is.
Yeah, I did purposely. I considered possibly making the father figure a little bit more firm-handed in the experience that I've had or my cousins have had when it comes to their Mexican fathers, but I didn't find it necessary because I really wanted to emphasize the scene in my film where he tells her daughter to cover up this dress that she's wearing because she's showing her shoulders. And in the middle of the party, he tells her to cover up. And I kind of wanted that to be violating enough where it kind of stood for itself. And you can kind of assume that he says and does things like that her entire life. And yeah, so I thought that would be enough. And I didn't want to continue a narrative, even though it is true that there is a lot of violence within Hispanic households or in a machismo culture. I didn't want to further push it. I found it necessary. I thought I wanted to make that smaller moment will very heavily impact this 15-year-old girl so that she doesn't need to be violated in any other way. And I think I didn't want to portray him that way because he's not like that, and I didn't want him to be like that. This Luis, my main character. So I'm glad I didn't have it either.
Yeah, you could tell that he kind of was affecting that, but also that he had so much love for his daughter and his family. So yeah, that really came across. And again, that's kind of another segue into another question I wanted to ask, and that each of these characters was not victimized, but they were affected by this traditional machismo, traditional masculinity that men are expected to conform to, and which really has a bad effect on everybody. So, Melanie, I want to start with you again and say, how do you think that can be kind of overcome by not just your female characters, but by women, but by everybody? Was like your film, it seemed to be a direct pushback against that, like advocating for more equality, excuse me.
Yeah, I definitely wanted the film to be a pushback into it. I wanted the women in the film to be a huge pushback. He's kind of besides some very small side only. He's my only male character, so I wanted, besides the daughter, the wife to be a very, very strong-handed character. The grandmother is a very strong character, and so I was trying to have a lot of people around him challenge his views on masculinity, because I think that also tied into masculinity and fatherhood is just this desire to provide. And I think from my experience, and I know a lot of people's experiences within Hispanic families, is that a lot of the ways to be a father is to financially provide. So sometimes people won't have a relationship with their dads very closely, but they're working all the time and they're providing financially, and they're sending money back home to Mexico, or they're sending their kids off to college, and that's their love language for as you say. So I wanted in the film Luis to believe that was the way he would show his daughter love, and that because he couldn't provide her with this lavish, grandiose party that is expected in Mexican culture for a quinceañera, that he had to realize that that's not ultimately what she wanted. His daughter, she wants to connect with him. So I wanted all of the women to challenge his beliefs, because he's an immigrant, because he grew up in Mexico with these beliefs and he was disappointing himself the entire time, that's not. His focus was off, and that's not what she ultimately wanted from him. And I think they got it at the end. So,
yeah, Jessica, how do you think we can kind of push back, both for the Millie whom you follow and kind of all of us?
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I think our film also addresses a lot of gender norms.
Definitely.
Transgendered women and transgendered, people in general, they are kind of riding a line between what's masculine and what's feminine. And it's interesting because Millie actually has a very romantic idea of masculinity and femininity. She takes a lot of movies from the 1950s, which she's a big fan of, and sees those characters, those masculine characters, as being her ideal sense of man, like the romantic, strong figure who's going to sweep the woman off her feet and take care of her. And when you look at the way she dresses in a very feminine, almost girl-like way. And so it's interesting how she kind of looks at that. And from our point of view, where my co-filmmaker and I feel we're have this very feminist look at things. It's an interesting dichotomy to really see how she's embracing her femininity, and how we as people, people who have grown up as women, have see it in an almost different way. So that was it was almost like a little eye-opening for us as well to kind of look at that through her eyes.
And Lucia?
Yeah, my characters, they grow up in a country where like women are not allowed pretty much to talk, or like to walk alone on the street is just super difficult for them. And what was interesting for me, like especially like the director of the orchestra, we could say he's a feminist. And actually in Afghanistan, I met many men who are feminist and who was really trying to like embrace the girls and give them self-confidence and really supporting them. So that was, that was very important in the film.
Wow, again, that's a perfect transition to my other question was that each of your films, making films about them that again don't embrace violence or stereotypes is still sadly very unusual. So Lucy, you just talked about a lot of people don't know that they focus on the violence we see. A lot of people don't see like a lot of men really trying to help women and be good allies and make a change. So do you think that is the biggest misconception about your subjects and about the situation that you depicted in your film?
Yeah, I think the whole world is looking at the struggle that like all Afghanistan is like Taliban, but it's not true. It's like very small group of like narrow-minded and violent people who just came into power and influenced all society to go 500 years back. And this is not the face of Afghanistan, and they don't represent the people of Afghanistan. So I think that needs to be very clear.
Yeah, and given where we are now in the U.S., I can't deny that there are quite a few people who would also like to go 500 years back. We've seen a lot of evidence of that. So yeah.
That's another point in my film, because with today's political situation, pretty much in every country, we have this party of extremists that have a huge support with people. And that's, you know, if it was possible in Afghanistan, when this small group of people came to power and took the country 500 years back, it's possible in Europe, in America, in pretty much every country. So we need to be very, very careful not to let these people to take the country democratically.
Definitely. And Jessica, your film, like, well, you're depicting a trans woman in Texas, and even if it is Austin, kind of like the liberal heart of Texas, I think a lot of people would have expected Millie to encounter more obstacles. So what do you think was the biggest misconception when you were trying to make this film and kind of shop it around?
I guess the biggest misconception was that that there aren't trans people all over the world. And if you think about it, trans people, you can find trans people in tiny little small towns in Texas. And that, you know, yes, she does live in Austin, and yes, Austin is considered, you know, the liberal bubble here. But, you know, that does not mean that there's not a community out there for everyone. And also that, you know, there aren't people out, you know, what I like about her story is that it does feel universal, and it feels that you don't have to be a trans person to relate to her story. Anyone who has any sort of, you know, insecurities or figuring out who they are as a person can relate to this.
Definitely, thank you. And very specific, but very universal kind of thing. And Melanie, you're making a film about a group of people who have really been used as scapegoats for a while, but I feel like it's gotten incredibly more vicious and really seeped into our legal system. So what do you think is the biggest misconception about, well, you're not making a documentary, but about your characters, this kind of family?
Yeah, that's a great question. It was really important to me to not make it a beat in my film, but make it very clear that all of the characters, except the girl, are undocumented. And I didn't want to make it a huge part of the film because I didn't want that to be their real identifiers, but I did want it to be assumed that they were. And so I think I really just wanted to challenge the misconception of just the absolute sacrifice and hard work and drivenness that it takes for people to leave their home country. And that from my experience, every single Mexican person I know that has come here, has immigrated here, came here for family, And so I really wanted that to be very clear in the film, that the relation, that it's kind of presumes that the whole family are immigrants, and that the daughter was born in the United States because she speaks English and she doesn't speak Spanish. And there's like a subtle beat of a family unable to return back to Mexico to celebrate another quinceañera that's going on. And I just wanted that to be really prevalent, because I think it just showcased that everyone who's there, who's present at this party, sacrificed something, and he was sacrificing something for this girl, his daughter. So just how absolutely family-oriented Hispanic people are, and driven they are, and how much they sacrifice to give back to their family.
Definitely. Thank you. And I want to address this question to you all, and it kind of ties into the reason why I started the film festival, which is to give people we don't normally see on screen more of a voice, more of an audience, as best I could. And once again, these films, they're the kind of films you make, they're kind of trendy now. It's considered fashionable to listen to women all of a sudden, so yay. But did you still have any problems, like wanting to make this film, wanted to shop it around, any of you, because of just why you're making them and the people you're making them about? And Jessica, you haven't gone first yet, so I'd like to start with you.
Sure. No, we've been very fortunate to have the film be embraced on the festival run and with audiences. And, there is a whole LGBTQ festivals out there that the film is played at as well, but it's also played at almost more at non-LGBTQ festivals. So it's been nice to have the film be embraced for what it is, and we've been fortunate that we have not come across any specific problems in that.
Well, that's a less interesting discussion, but I'm glad for your film. really, I'm glad. Not so much drama. Lucia? Oh, Lucia, your mic's not on. You're muted.
Yes, I made this film because like lots of these like populist politicians make a huge thing about immigrants and spread a lot of hate around. And really, like in my country, 8 people were given like citizenship last year. 8? So 8. Yes.
Goodness.
And policies are super strict, and we oppose like all the quotes, of redistributing refugees in the country, in all of the countries in Europe. So most people in my country haven't really seen immigrants, haven't really seen the refugees, and they never met one. So it's very important, just like to show them how they live, what's important to them, and that is the same things that our society is based on. That's like freedom of music, of self-expression, and human rights.
Same. It's a shame my country is falling short of that too. A nation ironically built on immigration. So yes. So you say, again, the next question, so you made this film specifically to try and change that perception, do you think, to kind of be a part of change?
Well, the film is about young girls, of the age of like from 12 to 18. And they are exactly the same as the girls in Slovakia. They have very similar like wants and needs. And I think, people can more easily understand the people, like what they want. That they are not extremists. That is a very small group of them, and not the whole nation. And and they fighting for freedom in their country. But if they decide to leave, it's a tough world and tough thing to do, especially when you're like 15 years old. So so those who stay are super brave, but if they decide to leave, it's their decision, and it's like as comprehensible, as the other one. Like if I would be on their place, I would definitely leave when I would be 15. That's too much to want from like such a small girls, to fight pretty much the elders and their parents, and many people in their country. So that's super brave.
Yeah, they're braver than they have to be. No one should have to be that brave. And Melanie, the experience of undocumented immigrants, you mentioned how much they sacrifice and how much there's a misperception and not acknowledging how much these families are sacrificing. So just to be undocumented, because the more I research, the harder it is for people who don't have money and connections to actually legally make their way to the U.S. and actually have a chance to make a better life. So did you kind of make this film too as to kind of try and be a part of positive change? Because it seems like the system is really rigged against people. And sorry.
Yeah, I think no, it's okay. I think I was just so frustrated at the narrative, and the narrative that always has been about undocumented people and continues to be. And I think just one, don't realize how ridiculously difficult it is to get a green card, how it is to get citizenship. My entire side Mexican, I'm half Mexican, so my that whole entire half were undocumented at one point and had found different means of finding citizenship and having a green card and things of that sort, and not all of them still do. And so it was really important to me to shift perspective, and I think that even under all of the bigotry, people will still unify about how important family can be and how important celebration is in tradition. And so I just wanted to, I know I always appreciate and love when I watch a film that introduces me to a culture I had known about prior, and makes me connect to characters I've never met before. So I strived to do that in my film. It was important to me.
Yeah. What I try to do with my fest too. So thank you. And Jessica, were you also trying to be a part of positive change with your film?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really being able to show who this person is, who Millie is, without because she is somewhat striking visually, and so when people will do a double take and they'll look and maybe they'll laugh or maybe they'll whisper and point and then they'll move on, but really getting to know who she is as a person. And I think that's really important. Like every person, there's a story behind them, and I feel like acceptance and understanding and compassion is really the things that we were trying to get across in telling this story.
And what do you think someone can do if they kind of don't have your creative outlets, if they're not a filmmaker? What can they do to be a part of positive change, do you think?
Well, certainly activism and is very important, but I think more about standing up for other people, being brave enough to say when they see something that is an injustice, or, whether a big injustice or a small one, standing up and saying, no, this is not right. I think there's a lot of work that can be done by, people of privilege, especially white people, to be able to understand and address what are these issues, both, within the Black and brown communities, of the immigration and everything, but to really be able to stand up and say, I understand this, and I understand that this is not right, and I want to make positive change on a local level, but obviously on a national level too.
Definitely. And Lucia, I want to same question for you.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Jessica. I think the film with the audiovisual experience can kind of embrace empathy in people, and they come to a situation and they suddenly have experience with what they hear, what they see, and they can say, I felt it differently, I seen it differently, and I have a knowledge about it, and to have that bravery to stand up against people in this situation. Yeah, I think that's what we all want, this knowledge to shift to people through our film.
And Melanie?
I also completely agree. I think I think that definitely, and standing up for people and trying to stay informed. If you and to be informed and have the time and the opportunity to be knowledgeable is also a privilege. But I think there's a lot of ways to engage with material, whether it's watching diverse movies or reading things, or just, I think art is so incredible in its power to engage people that might not normally pay attention to something. And so I think sharing that art is really important, and finding like community and not being afraid to stand up for or engage with things that don't relate to you. So I think that's a really important one. Like I obviously consider myself a feminist. I care about rights when it comes to Hispanic people, but that's not the only thing that I would defend or the only thing I would stand up for. And I think it's about not looking at it so linearly, but more, intersectional. So definitely just constantly thinking intersectionally is what I think is the best way to engage with anything.
Definitely. And while we've talked a lot about the obstacles and stuff people have had to overcome so far, I want to bring it back to what you guys love about filmmaking. Like, I want to ask each of you, why do you love filmmaking? Because it's obvious each of you really love what you do, and why you got into it in the first place. Melanie, why don't we kick things off with you?
Yeah, I think filmmaking is absolutely one of the most incredible art forms ever, and that might be biased, but that's how I feel, because I think it incorporates just so much of different art forms of photography and music and writing and poetry and movement, and I think it's incredible in that way, in its way to just promote empathy. And so I got engaged with it because I knew I wanted to do art, and nothing felt enough. And I think I was watching certain films that really got me to realize that it can completely shift my perspective in something. And it's just my favorite also just the community, that you can't make a film by yourself, and that you have to work with incredible people and to make a project and to help other people make their incredible work. Like, I just love that aspect of it as well.
And Jessica?
I agree with Melanie. I think that all of those points are, definitely why I love filmmaking. I also really love telling people stories. I am an incredibly curious person, and I love getting to know a subject. Often, because I primarily make documentaries, I often walk into a project not knowing very much about it, but knowing that I'm really curious and interested, and getting to really take a deep dive into either somebody's life or into a subject. And I really love that. And I love to be able to share my own curiosity on the screen. And also the collaboration of working with other people has been, it's always been really fantastic.
And Lucia?
Yeah, I think it's mainly the curiosity that you dive into something, and film is amazing art. It's actually all of the other arts are in it, and it takes a lot of studying and lots of different approaches, and I can see in each of my film, I'm learning so much. So each film is different, or I'm interested in different way of storytelling. So this creativity and it's really a passion.
Yeah, and I can tell. And to bring it back to the more serious note, like I mentioned, each of your characters is struggling, and not all of your characters, struggling with their place in the world. And that's something we usually associate with very young people. And a lot of your films are about very young people, but a lot of them are about adults who don't have it figured out, who are struggling in one way or another. Like, what do you want to say to people who are struggling with their place in the world, like especially now? Melanie, I think I'd like to start with you.
Sure. Yeah, I thought about that a lot when I took on making a film not about a young woman in her 20s who's always often struggling. I think that I would say, especially to parents, is that you don't stop growing, I think, at a certain age, and that you're constantly evolving and shifting. And sometimes the most beautiful moments are when your children teach you something, and they should always be teaching you something, and that you can adapt and shift. So I think that was the whole premise, is that this very, very traditionalist, macho man, but sweet and sensitive, who loved his daughter so much, changed. We changed the way he related to his daughter because it wasn't working in this world that he lives in now. So I think that's what I would say, is that it's just, there's no end goal to living a happy life. It's just constantly, I think, evolving and changing and adapting for yourself and the people you love.
Definitely. And Jessica?
Yeah, I guess I would say like that if you figure out who you are and you figure out what's going to make you happy, then you need to do that no matter what the cost is. And sometimes that can be really scary. And sometimes that involves taking, immense risks. But ultimately, your happiness is what is kind of the most important thing. And so for Millie, making that transition at a late age, she really had to say to herself, this is going to be very scary for me, but I know it's the best thing for me. And, using that as a kind of an inspiration is really important. So taking those risks and, feeling comfortable enough to, jump off that cliff.
Mm-hmm. And Lucia?
For me, it's mainly that my protagonists, they live in such a conditions that take us so much bravery, and I think we can just, admire them for how they live, but it's the only thing they know. But I don't know, to tell to people, like for me was the most. What shifted my consciousness the most was traveling, really just going to travel and seeing and other cultures, or try to understand other people. That's how you find yourself, I think.
Mm-hmm. That might already cover my next question, which is, what do you want people to take from your film? Lucia?
Well, I think from this film, I think I just want people to be very perceptive and very careful what they believe in, and be careful about the hoax or what the media tells them. It's never, usually, when they try to concentrate, this hate on some individual or some group of people. That's wrong, and that's easy to recognize because that's how you manipulate the public opinion. So they should be very careful, like whoever they exclude, and they direct the hate on certain people, either from some country or women or whoever. That's not right, and that's what we have to be careful about.
And Jessica?
I guess the takeaway would be not to make snap judgments, not to judge people based on their appearance or for first glance, and getting to know people is really important, and getting to not create stereotypes in their heads about who people are, where they come from, or what their backgrounds are, because you're going to be wrong usually most of the time.
Melanie?
I think what I want people to take away from my film depends on who's watching it. I think that if it's for not people that aren't Mexican or not Hispanic, I wanted it to be an introduction into very important traditions and surrounding a quinceañera. And but most importantly, I wanted Hispanic people to watch it, or Mexican people to watch it, and feel seen in some way. I think that was the best feedback I got, was from my own grandmother, who was 15 when she was married in Mexico and had kids, and she told me that I captured a quinceañera and that perfectly. So that was the highest compliment I got, was that she loved it. So I think it depends on who was watching it.
That's really beautiful. And even though your film isn't a documentary, once again, I was so curious as to what you think might happen next to these characters, because they were clear in a transition. The daughter's gonna probably leave the house. soon. So what do you see in the future for this family that you depict?
That's a good question. I think there's a lot of there's going to be a lot of trouble in the future. Not necessarily like in a severe way, but more in just that I think that what I loved about Anna Rosa, the young girl, is that she's struggling kind of with this very, you know, traditional immigrant family, but she's a teenager in the United States. And so I think that, and she's 15, it's only going to get more complicated. So
Oh, yes.
oh yeah. I think her struggles are going to be what my own struggles were, what my cousin's struggles are. It's just that, you know, this push and pull of wanting to leave a household, wanting to go away for college, but but Hispanic people, they tend to live with each other into their 30s and 40s until they have kids. So at least from my experience and what I've seen. So I think that'll just I think continuing, they'll reach new battlegrounds. But I have a feeling that if it were to continue, Luis would adapt the way he did. So.
Yeah, it seems so. And it really does. And Jessica, what do you think is next for Millie?
Well, Millie is, she's struggling right now, unfortunately, because of COVID. But she gets up every day and she paints houses, and, you know, that's something that she's really proud of, and, you know, something that she has a real skill in. And so, we hope that, you know, she continues to be able to get work and, stay positive and not get too, kind of in a downward cycle herself. But so far we check in with her a lot and she's doing pretty good.
Good to know. Good to know. And Lucia, there's so many people in your documentary that you follow. What do you think is next for, you know, the girls, the guy who's conducting the orchestra, and also have you heard from those 4 girls who kind of ran off?
Yeah, I did. Well, it was a big problem for the director of the orchestra. Of course, the girls weren't adult; they weren't 18, and they pretty much ran away from their parents because they were pushing them to leave the school and to marry. So, for like 2 of those 4 girls, you know, one of them was already engaged. So when she would go back to Afghanistan, she would not stand chance. Her parents would just take her out of the school and get her married. And the other one, the youngest one from the four girls, she was 15, and the school helped her to get to go to college to Australia to continue her education, but her mother refused it. And she wanted her also to get married. So I'm really happy that they did what they did. And I'm really happy it worked out. I still keep contact with them. 2 of them are in France and 2 of them are in Germany. And they go to school, they study the instrument. So I think they're going to do pretty good. And my main protagonist, Marcia, she became a conductor during past year, so she's conducting the orchestra, and and she wants to be a conductor. She wants to study on a university in London that I really hope gonna work out, and I just hope they just continue the amazing work what they're doing and change the country.
That's wonderful. And I'm sure many of you have countered sexism in your careers, and you're all at very different stages, regions, experiences. So I was wondering if you think this situation, because I'm not a filmmaker myself, do you think it's improved? I don't think we're going, from my perspective, I think it has somewhat improved, but I don't think we're going far. I don't think it's coming quick enough. So I'd love to hear your perspective on this. Jessica?
Yeah, I mean, I certainly have experienced sexism in my career. Yeah. I feel like there's been a lot of conversation recently about equity and really giving voice to underrepresented people. I don't know exactly if that's addressing women as much as people of color, and I really appreciate the fact that people are, talking about people of color and how there's a lack of support there, both financially in documentaries and just as a platform. But I feel like there should be more conversations specifically about women, and more conversation about when women feel that they're in a situation in the workplace, how to address that, because I don't know how much people are really talking about that right now.
Mm-hmm. And Melanie?
Yeah, I'm pretty I'm pretty new to, I feel, the film industry,
Mm-hmm.
and so I think I lived in this beautiful bubble at my school of like-minded people, and I still face my fair share of sexism. But now entering the workforce, I work at a film school, and I'm on sets. I feel and it's disappointing and a little heartbreaking sometimes to be faced with it every day. But I think I just try to find a good community of people to avoid those situations. I was on set today and it was all women. So it was really you just feel it. It's just different. It's a different energy, and it feels really nice. And so I try to surround myself with those kind of people, and just have a tough skin when I can't be in those kind of situations. So I think it's getting better, because I think more of my mentors are women or people of color, and I love that. But I still feel it might only be better in my peripheral vision. So.
And Lucia?
Exactly. You can never tell like what is your little bubble or your surroundings, and what is really going on in the world. Even I think being a film director, it takes the sexism, on a lot, and I don't know, like having the feeling like when we've been in Afghanistan, for example, I asked a guy, to get, in a shop to get us some juices, and he just wouldn't talk to me. He would just look at my cameraman and was like, why is the woman talking to me, And
wow.
Just having that feeling, I was completely shocked, like nobody behaved to me that way before. And, I really hope, these things not going to happen. And the brave girls of Afghanistan really going to change the country.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think is the most important thing that people in the film community can do to really make sure the change happens faster and to many of the people who are most vulnerable? Melanie, I'd like to kick off this discussion with you, because I'm glad the problem is drawing attention to that not all women are willing to protect each other, and especially with white women, let's face it, there can be a certain amount of complicity. Mm-hmm. So what do we all think that people in the filmmaker community can do to kind of hurry the change?
I think letting more women, people of color, queer people direct films and hold bigger positions. I've had a really unique experience now, I feel, of working at a film school, of just hearing how early it starts, of hearing professors describe cinematographers using he pronouns off the bat, of the white men in the classroom being the only people to get their hands on the camera. And I remember myself being incredibly intimidated by camera gripping, being an AC, and not thinking that was my role ever to play on set, that I wasn't strong enough, or that I just didn't have the eye for it. And so I think it starts with education, not showing the same films. Not that Hitchcock and Spielberg aren't amazing, but there are women filmmakers, people of color filmmakers, queer filmmakers forever. And so the fact that we're not showing those films in film school immediately really just sends a message. And I think education, very early education, that everyone is capable of incredible work, and more interesting work tends to come from unique people. So I think that's just starting from there.
Jessica?
I think that's really smart, and I really agree with that. I also believe that giving women and people of color more positions of authority is also really important. Allowing them to have their voice be the ones that are telling the stories, but also creating environments where if there is an issue, that people aren't afraid to talk about it, and creating safe spaces and communities that are supportive, because and that's supportive within, you know, men and women and people of color, and just allowing like someone to be able to, you know, call out a situation if they see it and not feel that there's going to be any repercussions or issues from, you know, for saying something is really important.
And Lucia?
For me, it's really just the self-confidence of women and girls that they are able to talk about it, and they are able to kind of raise a complaint in front of a group of people, and just empowering girls. That's super important. And as well, like raising the awareness of the issues that we see, the inequality that is still happening in our surroundings. That's super important.
Definitely. Can you guys think of kind of a more underrated film you enjoy, made by a woman, a person of color, etc., that you think people should check out? That's who am I gonna pick first for this question? Put all the pressure on first. Jessica, I think you're up. You hardly ever go first.
I'm terrible at thinking of titles when put on the spot, but I think there's a lot of African films that are out there right now that are really interesting, and also with some very strong female voices. I am blanking on some titles, but I think looking at you know, places like in both Africa and in South America, you know, really hearing those voices that are coming out of there, where it's not just European and American, is important to look at, because we tend to get those stories and those experiences from the viewpoint of kind of the like white colonialists, rather than from those that are experiencing them.
I've been checking out the Zanzibar Film Festival recently, so yeah, there's resources like that. They're harder to find because the bigger ones get more search results on Google for that simple reason. But yeah, they're out there. Lucia.
Yeah, maybe I would like to recommend a film that I recently really liked, and that's a film Lady on Fire by Céline Sciamma, French
Portrait
filmmaker.
of a Lady on Friday. On Fire.
Yeah, Portrait of a Lady on Fire. Yeah, I think it's fantastic film. It's fantastic filmmaking, and pretty much like this director, I can her films I can only recommend. She's amazing.
She seems amazing. I love that film.
Yeah.
And it's on Hulu, I believe.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, God, I love how these films are accessible to so many more people in a way they weren't before. Not just Melanie.
That's funny. My first thought of the question was like, oh, definitely Portrait of a Lady on Fire is absolutely amazing. But I also think for me personally, my goal right now is to just only watch films made by not white men. So I think that I try to do that. So films like on Netflix right now, there's a film Lingua Franca, which is actually about a trans woman who is an immigrant who's trying to get her green card, and that's made by a trans woman. I think she stars in it and she directed and wrote it. Cuties, I know had a lot of mixed. I thought that was an incredible film that's made by a Black woman, also sharing her experiences in that culture. There's films like The Watermelon Woman, like that's a film that's amazing because it's so low budget and so impactful. It's about a Black queer woman. So I think films like that just they're so easy to find if you just look it up. So I think
I love The Watermelon Woman.
The director basing it off of their story. I think that's the best. You can't get better than that.
Definitely, yeah. Like Watermelon Woman pissed off people in Congress for what it dared to depict, as they put it. And yeah, I meant to watch Lingua Franca, and I want to do a shout out to The Garden Left Behind, which is also about an undocumented immigrant trying to make a living for herself and her grandmother in New York City. And that played in the Film Girl Film Festival last year. And yeah, you made me want to shout out this 1982 film, Losing Ground. It was the first feature-length drama directed by a Black woman since the 1920s. And she died of cancer before she could make more, and she was kind of been rediscovered, Kathleen Collins, I believe. So that is a wonderful, wonderful film that I also want to encourage people to check out. Okay, and we're getting down to about 5 minutes left. So how I typically end this is asking each of the filmmakers, what's next for you? What's in the future? And Lucia, why don't we start with you this time?
Yeah, I just finished my first feature-length film. We are in post-production, so I'm very happy that next year is coming out. And it's a film about this old sailor who started to sail when he was like 20 years old. He never lived on land, and now he's 80 and he's not able to take care about his boat or himself, and he don't knows what to do. So it's really about this relationship between selfishness and freedom, and he looks back at his life and kind of thinks about it.
That sounds fascinating. And Jessica?
I have a film that I just produced that we're starting to send out to festivals about the parole issues in prison, and one person who was in prison and unable to get parole for a very, very, very long time due to kind of bureaucratic issues. And I also have several projects that are in development and all in different stages based on COVID delays and issues that we are all addressing.
Nice. And Melanie?
Yeah, I'm currently post-production for a documentary that I directed and I'm editing now because I love both documentary and narrative. And it's about intergenerational trauma passed down from a grandmother to a mother to a daughter under the basically it has it's tied a lot to do with these women's relationships with vanity and aging and just some emotional abuse, honestly. So I'm really excited. It's way too long to edit, definitely because of COVID sadness, but I'm very excited for it to be finished.
Yeah, also sounds quite fascinating. And yeah, I hope all you ladies hope COVID ends soon and that all your projects are able to basically resume. Okay, so yeah, I think that's about our hour. So I want to thank you ladies so much for joining me on this. Thank you for letting me screen your films in the festival. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much in showing our film. I'm really happy, it make it all the way to America.
It's my pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.